Presenting petitions. Présentation de pétition. The Honourable Member for Peace River Westlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Speaker, and as I like to call it, the Promised Land. Today I have the privilege of presenting 5 petitions. The first petition that I am presenting here is looking for additional safeguards around the euthanasia legislation. It looks like the government is pursuing with reckless abandon the expansion of euthanasia across the country. These people are concerned about rather than pursuing assisted dying, they would like us to have pursue assisted living, particularly around COVID. The plight of our elderly has been definitely highlighted, and so these petitioners are calling for the government to pursue stronger safeguards around euthanasia. Mr. Speaker, the second petition I'm presenting today was signed by 1,600 citizens of Canada, calling on the Government of Canada to move quickly to restore funding to organizations that help folks that have been caught up in human trafficking or sex trafficking. Earlier in the year, 9 organizations their funding was cut by the federal government. NGOs like the London Women's Abuse Centre lost their funding that support survivors of sex trafficking, and the government failed to renew their funding this spring in the middle of the pandemic. Due to public pressure, some of these NGOs got their funding back, and this petition is calling for the funding for all of the 9 NGOs to be restored. That's the second petition. The third petition, Mr. Speaker, is for the House of Commons to quickly pass the bill from my colleague from Saskatchewan, who, just trying to remember the name of the riding right now. It's not coming to me. I might get back to it there. She has a bill here calling for the condemnation of sex-selective abortion. These people that have signed this petition, they're calling for the Parliament of Canada to quickly pass this bill, and that is Yorkton, Melville. Yorkton Melville, our member from Yorkton Melville. She's doing great work on that one.
I'm a giver.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you from my colleague from Moose Jaw, Lanigan.
Center Lanigan.
Something like that. Sorry. The fourth petition that I've got here today is signed by Canadians from across the country who are concerned about the Order in Council banning firearms across the country. They're calling on the government to reverse this Order in Council made on May 1st and propose measures that will effectively address illegal firearm use in the country while respecting the rights of law-abiding citizens. They're calling for the government to enact substantial changes to Canada's firearms laws so that the government and the RCMP don't make unilateral decisions. And finally, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for your indulgence today, I have one petition calling on the government to recognize the genocide that is being perpetrated against the Uyghurs in China. We've probably all seen the photographs of the BBC report of the cattle cars and the masked prisoners being loaded on the cattle cars being brought to concentration camps. We have said over and over in this place, never again, and it appears on our watch it is happening again. And therefore, we are calling the government to recognize the genocide and use the Magnitsky Act in any way possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Channel Report.
Presenting petitions, I want to remind the honourable members to be as succinct as possible. The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and
I want to present a petition. There are a number of citizens across this country or Canadians who are very concerned about the Uyghur situation in China and are looking for Magnitsky sanctions amongst other mechanisms to, again, deal with this horrific issue. Thanks.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not to be outdone by my friend from Peace River Westlock, I also have 5 petitions. We're in a race to see who can have the most children and also apparently who can table the most petitions. So the first petition is with respect to illegal firearms in Canada. Petitioners are concerned about the import and use of illegal firearms, and they think the government is failing to focus on this problem by instead banning legal guns and going after responsible firearms owners. Petitioners want the government to reverse the order in council banning certain firearms imposed on May 1st and instead to propose effective measures for dealing with illegal guns, often smuggled into Canada, to actually focus on the real cause of gun crime. The second petition is with respect to Bill C-7. Petitioners are concerned that the government is removing vital safeguards that only a few short years ago the government said were very much essential. Petitioners want the government to reconsider their decision to remove the mandatory 10-day reflection period and also to reconsider their proposal in C-7 to remove the requirements for independent witnesses. The third petition brings attention to the human rights challenges, the persecution faced by Afghanistan's Sikh and Hindu minority, and it calls for action from the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. It calls for him to create a special program to help persecuted minorities in Afghanistan be able to be directly sponsored by the community here in Canada. And I note this petition has the support of a letter signed by members of the Conservative, the NDP, and the Green Party caucus. The fourth petition is about Bill S-204, private member's bill in the Senate proposed by Senator Salma Tulajan that would make it a criminal offense for a person to go abroad and receive an organ in a case where there has not been consent for that organ to be given. And petitioners are very much in support of Bill S-204. They want to see it passed quickly. The fifth and final petition highlights the absolutely horrific situation facing Uyghur Muslims in China, the persecution they're facing at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And it calls on this government to have the courage to match action with words and apply Magnitsky sanctions against those responsible for these modern-day concentration camps. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions. Before we continue, I want to remind the honourable members to bring their petitions to the table themselves. And when moving around the chamber, please remember to put on your masks. We don't want to endanger anyone's lives in the chamber. The honourable member for Coast of Bays, Central Notre Dame.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate this time, of course, to introduce a very important petition, one that I agree with substantially. And it concerns our children in the midst of COVID-19 and considering the arts in particular. So dance, drama, and the visual arts. Very important for our children, especially now with so many children out that we're out of throughout the summer out of school, of course, and even now it's hard for them to get back into the arts. But for physical activity, of course, for social interaction, arts and education, dance, drama, and the visual arts, of course, very important. Which brings me to the petition that I want to introduce, which is good for owner-operators of academies and studios, and it provides financial assistance to parents who want it to be more accessible for our kids to partake in the arts. So here is the petition precisely. The undersigned citizens of Canada call upon the Government of Canada to classify children's arts, dance, drama, and visual arts in the same educational category as music and provide HST, GST exempt status retroactive to January 1st, 2019. And a great proposal for getting our kids back into the arts so that they can flourish. I want to particularly thank Denise Vokey of St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and also Lee Newman and Tom Carter of the Stouffville Academy of Music and Dance for bringing this to my attention. Thank you so much. And we look forward to the government response.
Very good. Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Lethbridge.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to rise today in the House on behalf of constituents from across Canada who are raising the issue with regards to the Uyghur Muslim minority in China who are currently being persecuted at the hands of their own communist government. Mr. Speaker, these individuals who have signed this petition are asking that the Government of Canada take action on behalf of this vulnerable people group.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's an honor to present a petition. It's been signed some time ago, so events have moved, but it's still relevant. It's petition ID 10619-710, previously certified, in the matter of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the Government of Canada's decision to buy it from Kinder Morgan, the amount of money the petitioners believe was wasted in buying it, and a plea to the government as most of the $13 billion of additional costs has not yet been expended to halt financial support to the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Charles St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted actually to rise to present my very first petition in this place. It is also about the persecution of the Uyghurs. The petition says in part that it's clear that the UN conventions around the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide have been breached. Canada cannot remain silent in the face of this ongoing atrocity, and it formally requests that Uyghurs in China have been and are being subject to recognize that Uyghurs in China have been and are being subject to genocide, and to use the Magnitsky Act in this case. I just want to say, as it is my first time, Mr. Speaker, standing up, that I was reminded of one of my favorite writer's quotes when I was reading this petition, and I will be brief, but he said, Elie Wiesel said, the writer and Holocaust survivor, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too have a petition on behalf of Canadians calling on this House to formally recognize the genocide and atrocities against the Uyghur population and Muslim minorities in China, and for us to take the appropriate action via sanctions. As someone who is deployed to countries where genocide has occurred, we need to stand up against this now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
The Uyghurs and the genocide that is happening against them. Just as many of my colleagues have stated, this is an issue that many Canadians are standing strong on, that we should be against this genocide and putting forward the Magnitsky Act. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate that. I wish to join my colleagues in presenting this petition signed by Canadians from all across this great country, calling upon the Communist Party of China to stop their horrific human rights abuses against the Uyghurs, and also asking the Parliament of Canada and the Government of Canada to impose sanctions on those responsible. Thank you.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Calgary Confederation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too have a petition here regarding the issue in China, which brings attention to the Uyghur Muslims and the ongoing campaign of the Uyghur birth suppression by the Chinese Communist Party, which includes methods such as forced sterilization and abortion. It is estimated up to 3 million Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities have been detained in what have been described as concentration camps. So we would like to use the Magnitsky Act and sanctions to those that are responsible for these heinous crimes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just finished. Presenting petitions, the honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to table this petition with 98 signatories who call on Parliament to pass a criminal code prohibition on sex-selective abortions. They are drawing attention to the House of Commons that sex-selective abortions are legally permitted in Canada. I believe a broad consensus exists among Canadians to end this abhorrent practice. As parliamentarians, we too must be clear on this. I hope this consensus will be respected and reflected in this House of Commons. Thank you.
Presenting petitions. Présentation de pétitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask that all questions be allowed to stand at this time, please.
Agreed. Yes, we have a point of order. The Honourable Member for...
I apologize for interrupting routine proceedings, Mr. Speaker, but I think it might be appropriate at this time for you to remind members that when presenting petitions, as my friend and colleague from Costa Bay Central, Notre Dame did, they are merely to present the petition and not express their own personal views. As our colleague from Newfoundland did, he expressed his views that he was in support of the petition that he presented. And, Mr. Speaker, I think it would be well advised for you to remind members that that is against the normal procedures of this House.
I think that was very well put. I want to remind all the members that when presenting the petitions, they're presenting the petition, not giving their opinion on that. So thank you for bringing that up. Orders of the day.
Ordre émanant du gouvernement, projet de loi émanant du gouvernement commune, reprise du débat sur les...
Resuming debate on Bill C3, an act to amend the Criminal Code.
Fort Saskatchewan has 5 minutes left in his speech.
You know, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought I had 19 minutes left, actually, so maybe you can... No, I'm just joking. Don't worry. I'm just kidding. Mr. Speaker, maybe by unanimous consent, the Parliament Secretary will allow me more time.
Denied.
Mr. Speaker, the bulk of my remarks were shared yesterday, in which I spoke about the importance of Bill C3, a bill which would introduce effectively mandatory training with respect to sexual assault for people becoming judges, and also require them to provide written arguments in those cases. And I won't repeat all of those arguments. I wanted to